Good morning. Today's interview is with Judge Angela Dempsey, Circuit Court Judge.
So I've been on the bench as a circuit judge for a little over 14 years. Be 15 in November, actually. And during that time, I've fairly and efficiently resolved thousands of cases. I've presided over hundreds of trials, and that's in all divisions of the court: criminal, civil, and family. I've also focused on being able to control the courtroom. There's a lot of moving parts when you're doing particularly jury trials with the jurors, the lawyers, clerks, clients, witnesses, law enforcement as bailiffs. So that can be a challenge working with everybody. But I've really enjoyed my time on the bench, and I think I've proven to be fair and honest and a good judge.
So for voters who are interested in assisting in your campaign efforts, how can they do that?
Campaigning during the time of COVID has been a bit of a challenge. It's not your traditional in-person campaigning. So there's a lot more reliance on social media and reaching out to voters in other ways. So people could share stuff on social media. People could check out my website, which is judgeangeladempsey.com, and get involved that way.
And most importantly, getting out to vote, ordering their ballots by mail if they need to. Every vote needs to matter, and every vote counts.
It does. And usually the turnout's a little lower in August than November, but we're hoping that people will turn out. If you're not registered, you have to register by July 20th, and I think the vote by mail ballots start to go out in mid-July.
So you mentioned COVID. Let's talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the courtroom. How has COVID-19 impacted procedure and timing of hearings?
So right now I'm in the civil division, and so we can't do, obviously, jury trials, and foreclosures have been stayed. But other than those two things, everything else is moving forward in civil, and we conduct a lot of hearings via phone and Zoom, which in civil you conduct a fair amount of hearings over the phone anyway, so we're pretty used to that. Filings are down a little bit, but only probably about 10 or 15% in civil. So in civil, we're moving forward pretty well as normal. In criminal, it's had a greater effect. It's harder to do things over the phone and Zoom. They did do a really good job at first getting a lot of pleas done and getting the jail population down. And then they started doing some out-of-custody pleas a couple weeks ago, and those have been going smoothly, but there's obviously a lot of constitutional rights, including the right of confrontation, that make it a little harder to do remote proceedings in criminal.
I know your jurisdiction obviously is limited to, in many ways, to your own courtroom and obviously to the circuit in which you serve, but COVID-19 must have had also the impact of judges and all involved looking at processes going forward. I mean, there must be efficiencies that have been gained in this and procedures that you all are looking at to address the situation going forward, especially in light of the fact it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think there are some efficiencies that have been gained, particularly for shorter hearings. It's easier for clients that don't have to maybe leave work or get childcare and drive to the courthouse and everything. So that can be a lot easier for both clients and lawyers. And so we'll probably continue a lot of that forward after COVID, particularly in civil. Some judges have noticed, so when we do remote proceedings, people don't maybe treat it as formally as an in-person proceeding, so that can be a little bit of a challenge.
The other issue that's out there that must also be impacting the courtroom, or at least finding your role in this opportunity, is the Black Lives Matter movement and the concerns related to racial and social injustice. You must be sensitive, of course, and aware to everything that's happening around you. What's your role in all of that, and is there a place for you to influence the process in a positive, sustainable way going forward, Judge?
To a large extent, as a judge, I'm limited on what I can say about Black Lives Matter and similar movements because of the canons, but then also because I could receive a case or controversy that is either directly related to that or sort of touches on that issues. One thing that's important in my role is to foster fair and just resolution of cases for everyone. And when we're confronted with examples of unfairness, which we have been more recently, it's important for judges to be mindful of that when they're evaluating and fairly adjudicating cases.
And is there a role, judges generally, broadly, outside of the courtroom, is there a role for judges in the dialogue around police reform and criminal justice reform? Maybe through the judicial collegiality of all of you, or maybe through the Florida bar. Is there a place in a larger dialogue, you think?
Somewhat. I mean, like, for example, I'm involved in judicial education. I'm the criminal track leader, which means I develop and teach criminal courses to the other 600 circuit judges in Florida. And we have been, over the past couple years, making sure we address fairness and diversity and implicit bias in sentencing or any other time it comes up. So we are definitely, as a body of circuit judges in Florida, aware of that and trying to be sensitive to that. We wouldn't be able to be directly involved, I don't think, with law enforcement reform or reform with prosecutors or anything to that extent, but certainly through what we call the Judicial College, which is just the group of circuit judges, and then also to some extent through the bar. I'm incoming chair starting tomorrow of the Florida Bar's Rule of Criminal Procedure Committee.
Wonderful, congratulations.
So, thank you, I'm excited about that.
The new bar president, Mike Tanner, as you know, is a personal friend and colleague, and I just really applaud your efforts to work through the Florida bar to have a greater impact on the entire state.
Yes, yeah, it's important to be professionally involved as much as you can, both locally and statewide.
So because I know you and have watched your career, I know that mentoring young women is important to you. Why is it important to you?
It's important to me both to give back to people as they're maturing and coming up through law school. I've mentored at the law school and then also mentored young lawyers. I just want to give them a good start and just help lawyers along as much as I can. It's important for young lawyers to make a good first impression because that sticks with people a lot. So I like to focus on that. And I encourage people to get involved in their community, both professionally and through community service.
What career advice do you give those girls?
It sort of depends what type of law they want to get involved with. For example, the last couple of years we've had a program where first-year law students have been interning with us at the court, which is helpful because they can get an idea of the different divisions. They'll go and observe a lot of things. This summer we're having to do that remotely, so we'll see how that works. But I just tell them to always be prepared and be on time and treat everyone with respect is important too. Everyone from the clerk to the janitor to the lawyers to the judges.
Because one day they could grow up to be a judge.
Right.
So speaking of that though, speaking of your career and growing up to be a judge, did you always know this is what you wanted to do?
It was a goal of mine when I applied to law school. I remember I wrote about it on some of the essays. And I did do litigation as a state attorney for about 4 years in Orlando. And then I did civil litigation with the Department of Environmental Protection, was a statewide practice. Pretty big cases, CERCLA and RCRA. Hazardous substance and hazardous waste.
As you know, I started Florida's Women in Energy Leadership Forum 5 years ago now, and through that process, one of the questions I always get as a wife, mother, professional working more than 60 hours a week sometimes, right. I always get the question, work-life balance. So how do you answer the question to your mentees? How do you maintain a work-life balance?
It is a challenge, but you just have to carve out time for your family and friends. And then also, I think I get a lot out of, and I think other people do, giving back to the community. So I think it's helpful to carve out time for that. I work with Rotary, Leadership Tallahassee, and Second Harvest, volunteering with them, and I think it's worthwhile spending time on that. But then also, of course, self-care and stress relief. I'm a runner, so that's how I address that. But people need to kind of find their own niche with that, whether it be yoga or meditation or gardening. People need to find what works for them.
Are you able to leave work at work?
Not most of the time, no. There's pretty much always an issue or a case that I'm thinking about, and sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about one of those.
Well, I think that makes you a very effective, caring judge. Judge, as you know, I've endorsed your campaign. I know you personally and professionally. I know your work ethics. I want the voters to know you as well. If you could pick 3 characteristics about yourself that you think the voter really should know about you, what would those 3 things be?
Sure. I think probably the most important 3 things are my experience on the bench, that I've handled all types of cases in all of the divisions of the court, and that's very important, and it brings not only experience but maturity to handle different issues that come up before us that can be stressful. Also, I think I've demonstrated my hard work and work ethic, work long hours. I've resolved a lot of cases. I think I've demonstrated a standard of high ethics, and that's very important. You need to make sure that you're following the rules, and those rules can to some extent evolve over time, so I'm always focused on any changes there.
Judge, you make us so proud.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all of what you do for our circuit. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being a great example, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your endorsement.
Appreciate it.